that's life. That's the experience. That's taking the first step, which is going out and making a mess. And people need to do more of that. They need to understand no decision's too permanent. They need to understand that the way that you're going to get started at doing anything, including being a real estate developer, is to go out and actually just make a mess.
Yep.
I mean, you've got to create something, right? If you're not taking action, you're not going out there and you're trying something, you're not going to learn from it. You're not going to know how to kind of organize it so that you can get better at it. And
you got to get yourself in the weeds and figure out how to get out. All right, welcome to Atrium Capital Group's Developer Podcast. We have Giovanni Fernandez with us today. We're going to learn a little bit more about your story, what you've been through. We've had the opportunity to know each other now for 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 now. And Emma Mori is here with us as well, our development leader for Atrium. So let's get right into it. Just kind of want to hear where you're from originally. Give us a little bit of your story. Like, where'd you grow up? How was that?
Yeah. So I grew up in Los Angeles area. And that's kind of a fun question, right? It's like people don't ask you anymore, like, wait, where are you from? Like,
yeah,
they're so much more creative these days. But I grew up in LA, and just come from a hardworking family. My family. It's funny. I live in Florida now, and there's so many Cuban people here in Florida, and
we got Emma.
Like Emma's, yes. Cuban. And what's funny is like, in LA, like our family, when we got here from Cuba, went to Los Angeles. And so like, you're so unique over there. And then I come over here after so many years of my life, and now I'm like,
one of the crowd.
You're not exotic anymore.
It's so unique. So I grew up in the Los Angeles market.
Not to interrupt, I just have, so my wife's family is from Cuba and went to New Jersey, went the New Jersey route. So I go up there and I spend a lot of time with them, kind of learning about their businesses. And one of the things I think is amazing about the Cubans is that they came here with nothing, and most of them have become so successful, like getting everything taken away. How was it for your parents? Was it?
No, I mean, it was the same. And I think that, it's like a long history that, and I know the podcast is not about this, but you take, let's say 50, 60 years of what's gone on in Cuba, and you have certain generations that came at certain times. And our family came in the 1960s time. And so it's your initial group of people who are leaving Cuba. And I think people who initially left were people who were entrepreneurial. Like, they were people who had businesses, and those businesses were taken away from them. So they weren't going to stand for that environment, right? And they didn't want to be a part of that environment. So they said, look, this is not for us. Let's go somewhere that's going to be better, right? That's going to allow us to live that dream of being free and making our own way for ourselves. So I think that's what you get with a lot of the original groups that came here to the United States. My grandfather, as a lot of people know, in owning Otto's High Dive, he owned a bar and restaurant in Cuba in the 1950s. He also owned another nightclub and a cafe, all in this little town called Manzanillo, Cuba.
Yeah.
And government showed up one day and they said, hey, we have a nice check for you in Havana. And unfortunately, now in as a communist government, you're not allowed to have your own business, but we are going to pay you for it. And the long and short is that he went to Havana, and they were like, I don't even know who you are, but so he ended up leaving.
It's crazy for me, just I grew up in the Midwest, Ohio kid, and so I never even thought, you don't really think anything like that can happen. And then just having the opportunity to be obviously my wife's family and learning about what happened. And, her dad tells his story of when he got the go ahead, the green light to come. Right. He actually went to Spain first. But just that story, it's like, wow, I didn't know this was even, something that happened. And there are a lot of Cubans here now. And Emma came, I think you came and.
Yeah, we moved over in 98, and we had to do the Cuba, Salvador, Orlando, but we're also kind of not the standard Cuban family that just stayed in South Florida. We came straight to Orlando, and we grew up here, which to this day I thank my parents for that. But we were part of the other wave of Cubans, so we left later. And to your point, I think the first wave is people that already had businesses, knew and saw what was coming, like, we're getting out of here. And then I think every wave after that just had to leave because you had to leave.
Yeah.
It's either that or starve. So thankfully my parents work hard, and I'm here and love it.
What I think is interesting about the conversation, actually, and normally this conversation goes into the world of, And that's why I had so much ambition, and my grandfather taught me that, and my father taught me that, and work ethic, and this is the greatest country in the world, and it absolutely is. But I'm sitting right across from you, and you grew up here in the Midwest, and we're both developers. And so I got to kind of like take my hat off to you too, because I guess, I had a lot of great reasons why I had to be successful and why I was so passionate about it. And I just think you must come from an amazing family as well, because to teach you those morals and values, to say, yeah, like, we're from here and this is the greatest place in the world. You better take advantage of that. I mean, I
it's
love that.
Like we
Adam.
have to do it.
Yeah, it's like that's a part that's ingrained in us. That's a part of like why we're here, and that's why I think so many people are after that success. But I think it's important, in this moment to say, listen, I wish many more people who are born here today, and I'm talking about my two boys who are 10 and 12, I want them to have that same feeling of pride, drive that this is the greatest place in the world, and really believe that. And
I think when our kids too, like I have a 6 and 8 year old, and one, everybody has pain that they felt in some way or another. Like mine was different. I came, obviously growing up in Toledo, Ohio is not the most beautiful place on earth, so that was my, my pain and kind of the way that I grew up. But then you think for your kids, like you're obviously providing them a really good life. And so you're like, what drive, like I always ask people when I'm that are older than us that have done it and have really successful kids, I'm like, what did you do? Like, cause that's weighing on me the most. Like they're growing up a little bit easier, obviously, but you want them to keep taking what you've done and grow it.
Well, I've heard like so many different cool stories from other friends of mine, developer friends of mine who are successful and they have kids. And, I've heard extremes, anything from, I have one gentleman who wrote in their will, like the kids have to manage the business of all the assets and the rentals with X amount of return, and every time it comes under that return, they have to actually give away a piece of property.
Oh my gosh, that's really awesome.
From their portfolio.
Yeah.
So it's like, if you don't know how to operate it, then you shouldn't be able to benefit from it. So, I think that what's important to add here is people will talk about legacy often. And I was just having this conversation this morning about legacy, and somebody had alluded to legacy meaning just financially what you're going to pass along. And I think that's completely, I don't know if I'd say wrong, but I think that my perspective about legacy is quite different. I think that when you think about your entire family, I'm not going to be passing along money to an aunt or a cousin necessarily. So what is actually your legacy? And I think your legacy is your example. It's your example that you're leaving for for your family, but also for your children. And I think that if you are leading by example and doing the right things, what you feel to be right, that will be your legacy. And I think that that's where your kids are going to decide what they want to do with that example.
Like, what do you do on a daily basis? Like where, that you show, not anything to do with work, but like, what are some things that you're doing every day? And I'm sure you're sitting there saying, hey, they're watching me do this. Like, is there things that you do where you're like purposeful about it so they see it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when you say me, I'm going to include my wife, Elise, in this, because I think we both are obviously raising the kids, and we both are involved in the business. We both have different athletic goals. Wearing my Ironman hat, just completed my second full Ironman this last Sunday in Canada. And
was that the 100 and that's 140 miles?
140 miles.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And he was telling us a little bit before about, we were talking about a race where we were running 13 miles and he just did 140. So that's pretty awesome.
Definitely something you got to work towards. Right. And it's a big thing, with regard to discipline. And I think that to answer your question, it's a combination of a handful of things that I think we do that aren't business related. And at the same time, everything applies to everything. Elise will do affirmations with the kids in the car on the way to school every morning religiously. And I think that's so amazing.
Like what kind of affirmation?
I love my mom. I love my dad. I love my brother. I'm gonna have a great day.
It's awesome.
Just getting them in the right
I'm
mindset.
Confident. I'm handsome. I'm intelligent. And so I think that I'm a big believer of, if you tell yourself something over and over and over and over, you will believe that. And I think that the best thing you can do for your children is give them confidence. And it's tricky because every person is different. Every personality is different. And so putting confidence into different personalities requires different activities. And so I think it's going to be, them watching me get up at 3:30, 4 in the morning to, for a year prep for a 140-mile race says something about what they should be doing when they're either studying or when they are, they both play basketball, AAU travel basketball, and they have their private coaches, and Elise and I have our private coaches, and we know this recipe for success in life requires certain things, and so they are mimicking what we are doing in their own little lives. They have their affirmations, they have their times, they have their private coaches on this day and that day, they have their group coaching on this day and that. You have to be able to work on yourself. You've got to be able to lead others. And so I think that when you're living this everyday life, it's the moments, right? It's the small things that make the difference. And if you have that clear vision at the end, you can live in those moments with that discipline. It's not something that happens overnight. And I just want to say one more thing. This race I just did parallels what I know about business and what I know about personal relationships in life. Lessons are the same ones over and over. And there is no shortcut to success. You have to go through all the pain, all the hurt, all the experience in order to get wisdom, in order to make great decisions. Once you make those great decisions, you're going to start seeing some success. And this was the first race after doing 2 full races now at 140 miles and 3 70-mile races that are all Ironman races, to be able to make the best decisions on a very technical race that I just ran, where the next day I was walking and felt fine. And that just says a lot about training and the experience on the times that you didn't train certain ways, and the experience that you didn't eat correctly. So in business, it's the same thing. You aren't going to become a real estate developer tomorrow, and you aren't going to become successful at being a real estate developer tomorrow. You're going to have to grind and take time and learn from everything that you do. And I know that that's a common lesson, but it's an important one to bring up. And I think that, you said it really well. I think what I've learned the most over the past 5 years is that the business part is like, I don't feel like 10% of it. I feel like 90% is like how you're treating yourself when you're not at work, and the way that the things that you're doing in your off time. And I just think it's so important when you put yourself in a regimented program like that. I'm sure that work was always on your mind, but I feel like you're probably, when you show up to work after you've gotten up at 3 or 4 in the morning, you've spent all the time putting in the work, it makes your day a lot easier. You know, you're healthy, your mind's clear, you can make more educated decisions, versus when you're not. And look, you go through like cycles in your life. We started off the podcast by saying, hey, like, where'd you come from, right? And I lived in LA until I turned 18, and I was the first person in my family to go away to college, and I went to University of Arizona. And it's funny because like my kids will go tour different colleges and visit campuses, and they'll do that whole thing when they're ready to go. And my version was, I got into University of Arizona. I wasn't guided on SATs or how you apply, and I just it went down that way. And I showed up the week of that school started at University of Arizona without ever visiting that campus. That's life. That's the experience. That's taking the first step, which is going out and making a mess. And people need to do more of that. They need to understand no decision's too permanent. They need to understand that the way that you're going to get started at doing anything, including being a real estate developer, is to go out and actually just make a mess. I mean, you've got to create something, right? If you're not taking action, you're not going out there and you're trying something, you're not going to learn from it. You're not going to know how to kind of organize it so that you can get better at it. And you got to get yourself in the weeds and figure out how to get out. So you left at 18, went to Arizona. How did you meet Elise? Was that soon after? Is there
Give us
when I went to University of Arizona, I was 18, and I bought my first house when I was 18, and I bought a couple more, and I'd rent them out to college classmates. What's funny about this story, and if there's anybody watching it as a developer, my first roommate who wanted to go live in the house I bought for the first time in college was Charles Bruck.
Okay.
Charles Bruck built the Armature Works in Tampa.
Yeah.
So Chaz and I were roommates, which was a lot of fun. Fun guy. He always was real smart about how he saw life, how he's going to approach life. And it was just a great experience, us, doing that. And
where's he from originally?
He's originally from Tampa.
From Tampa, and went to Arizona.
And he went to University of Arizona.
Okay.
So that's where I met him. But when I graduated college, living, a young man whose family came from Cuba, and I said, hey, I got to live like this structured corporate life, and I've got to live this American dream. And so I got to go to college, and I got to get this great job. So I walk in, to the job fair as I'm graduating, and I'm like, hey, what's the best job I can get, in this place? And I start interviewing for jobs, and I actually got a really great job with Philip Morris USA. There was like 6 people in the interview. You go through like 6 interviews, 300 people applied. They were going to hire 2 people. I ended up dancing salsa with the regional vice president in that interview. And then she hired me.
That's a huge win.
Yeah. So that's what got me that job.
That's awesome.
Got to grab and take what you can.
Yeah. So,
but that job relocated me to Las Vegas, Nevada.
Okay.
And so I ended up in Las Vegas, where I worked for Philip Morris USA, and it's a long story of how I transitioned back into real estate. But the long and short is that I had a person that was not above me, but above that person, and I got friendly with them.
Yep.
And we would box together, daily. His name was Gino. Really great guy, but he was like 10 years older than me. And I said to him one day, I said, Gino, I got to ask, personal question, but I got to ask. I said, you're 10 years ahead of me. I said, you're really awesome at what you do. I think I'm probably on the same path as what you've been on. How much do you make?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I make $120,000 a year. And I said, I quit.
Yeah.
And he goes, what? And I go, well, yeah, I would be a fool. Not that there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah.
I know everybody's got to know their personal journey, what they're aspired to do.
Yep.
So for me, I just knew that's not what I aspired to do.
Yep.
And so I explained
Did you legit quit that day?
In that moment, no. He said it to me. I said, I quit.
That's awesome.
And that was it.
That's amazing.
And it was a great experience, though, when I was working for him. I learned a ton in corporate, and I learned a lot about tracking things in spreadsheets and how to organize business. And so I think I take a lot of those things today into the entrepreneurial side, but, and I think you could probably speak to that too.
Yeah.
But, so I set off on my journey to just be a real estate investor, and started the path like a lot of people do in real estate by going out and get my real estate license. Really didn't know much about anything at that moment. And I went and hung my license with a guy that was teaching traditional real estate. And every time I would go try to help someone buy a property, I kept wondering, like, why am I helping them buy a property? Like, I should be buying a property.
Yeah.
So
that's first of all, I think it's amazing that you did that. Like, and I do know when you're going, one of the things I've learned in life is, like, obviously find the people that have done it already and then emulate what they're doing. So the fact that you legit quit in that moment is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. Cause I would have gone home and like thought about it. Like, is this the right thing, or how do I set this up? But, and so, take me back just a minute. How were you buying that? Like when you were,
so I want to take you back to that, but you just sparked something else that I think is funny. Gino calls me 6 months after I quit. He goes, hey, Giovanni. He's like, I quit.
Oh my gosh.
And I go, Gino, why? He goes, I always had this dream of doing what I wanted to do. And you inspired me to do that.
That's unbelievable.
Super successful.
Do you know him today?
Yeah, today I know Gino.
That's awesome.
So we text every now and again. He's in Sacramento. He went out and opened this restaurant called the Brick House, and then he opened a couple more, and he's just super successful.
Yeah.
And he's just doing what he loves.
That's
right?
awesome.
So I always thought that was amazing.
Yeah.
And fast forward, that's probably why I love, like, in some form or fashion, I was mentoring somebody. But you were asking me.
Well, let's go back to this. Let's go to, so how did you meet Elise? And then like, give me to almost like personal life wise to here, and then we'll go to real estate.
So personal life, there's so many tangents.
I know.
Right?
No, I
so
love it.
fun
That's
to
what it's
talk
fun about.
right? But when I graduated college, and I graduated a semester early from college, had a couple of jobs, bought my first house by understanding how you buy houses. At that time, it was 80-20 loans. And I would just kind of work backwards, and I'd say, hey, you know, how do I qualify for this loan? I went and asked and did some research, and I kind of just made myself look right on paper.
Yep.
And so I was able to do that. And then once I had bought the first one, then I had gotten the second one. And then once I sold those properties, it kind of started funding me to move forward.
So all your original ones you're trying to sell, like.
So I'd hold them for just a short period of time while I was in college. But when I graduated and got relocated, I was very I had to touch and feel. That's why I'm a real estate guy. So when I moved from Arizona, I said, I'm selling these assets and I'm taking, the money and going along with me. So I'm in Las Vegas, and about a year-ish into living in Las Vegas, my friends were still kind of wrapping college up, and they're like, hey, we're going to go to spring break. And they say, hey, do you want to go to spring break with us? And I said, yeah, I'd love to go to spring break. I need a break from I was just at that moment leaving Philip Morris, transitioning to real estate. And we were helping one of our cousins who was a doctor in Cuba at the time come here from Cuba through Honduras. And he had just gotten here a week before I was going to go on spring break. And I said, hey, Frank, you should come on spring break.
Yeah.
So I bring this guy who just got here from Cuba, right? I'm young. I'm 22 years old at this point. I have
You're
no
this
idea
great.
that this guy is going to be in full-blown shock when he gets goes on vacation in spring break in the United States. Right?
That's awesome.
He's already in shock when he sees what he sees when he gets here, right?
Now you're going spring break.
Yeah. I mean, where he's from, where my family's from, I was in Cuba in 2016. Another tangent. But horse and carriage.
Yeah.
I mean, so
is small.
Yeah, so you're going from horse and carriage to
spring break, wherever it is.
So what's funny about that is that I didn't have any ties to Florida at the time, and spring break was going to be in Miami. So I go to Miami for spring break, and I am with 6 or 7 guys. My best friend Jeremiah is there, who I'd gone to high school with, and we're standing in this line at this club called Mansion. And
I remember that.
I lived in Las Vegas. I'm used to, in Vegas, you pay the door guy, you get right in. But I'm now with a few of my buddies. We're all guys. I'm I'm going to chill. It doesn't have to be a whole crazy thing here. I'm just going to chill. I'm just going to chill in line. It's going to take a few minutes. It's fine. So I'm just chilling in line.
Yeah. Over
time, I get towards the front, and these 3 girls get out of this cab, and I turn to Jeremiah and I go, Jeremiah, I go, you see that girl right there? I said, I'm going to marry her.
Oh, wow.
And he goes, Giovanni, he's like, you never talk like that. What's your deal? He's like, you're so black and white, all this mush. He's like, what do you mean you're going to marry her? I go, I don't know, but Jeremiah, I'm going to marry her.
Yeah. Just from getting out of the cab.
I'm a big believer of, I had a book that I wrote since I was 15, 16.
Yeah.
And I would describe everything in my life that I wanted.
Yeah.
So when I saw her, I knew that's exactly who I was going to marry.
That's awesome.
Because it just fit exactly what I knew I was looking for, right?
Yep.
I had a focus. So here's what's crazy. I get to the front. They get out of the cab. The bouncer says, hey, girls, don't go to the back of the line. We're letting in one guy and one girl at a time. Kid you not, I said nothing to this guy. He grabs my hand. I'm the 3rd person in line.
Yeah.
He grabs my hand. He grabs her hand, and he puts us in the club together.
Oh my gosh.
And at that point, I just got to try to do my best to convince this girl that she's going to
marry
me,
you.
Right?
Yeah, right after that moment.
I can't ask now, but so kind of the rest is history there, but that's how I met Elise.
That's pretty unbelievable.
Yeah, she was from New York, and she was she went to Fordham in the Bronx, and she was captain of her cheerleading team and very involved in school and just real smart, graduated with a degree in economics. And when she graduated, she moved out to Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And she started working at one of the large companies in Las Vegas who owns several hotels and casinos as an analyst, and then really quickly moved up as an operations manager. And she was awesome, man. She was smart, quick, very awesome personality, very good at what she did. And after a couple years of her doing that, and I was growing the real estate side, I said, look, Elise, like, there's no way that that as a family, like, we want to be doing this separate career thing. I said, I would love for us to just use both of our, abilities together and really grow this thing. So that was in 2009-10 time. And I flew her to Italy at the time, right as we're having this conversation. I asked her to marry me in Italy. That's and awesome. Then we came back, we had our wedding, and then we started working together. And we've been working together
ever since.
And it's it's been 13 years that we've worked together. And she is just the perfect person for me, because I'm more like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
And she just never, like, you just can't knock her off of her just chill.
Yeah, she's the rock.
She's your rocket fuel.
She's just, and she's always got the right answer, and she always understands. Like, she's very, very, very great at what she does. Really, basically everything.
I also think too, I know a lot of people ask me, I mean, I'm obviously, this isn't about me, but love my wife a lot, and think that I wouldn't be where I am today if she wasn't there doing it. Like, how important, just for people that are younger out there that are looking for girls getting out of cabs at clubs, like how important is it to your success? I mean, overall, like, is it the most important? I mean, and I don't know the way to articulate that, or for you to articulate that, but I think it's important, your partner, and I just wonder how you feel.
I'll give it a shot, right?
Yeah.
Like,
most important things you do in life, in my opinion.
That's the thing, right? And you just said it. That's a great segue. In my opinion, and in your opinion, but not in everybody's opinion, right? And so I think you have to know yourself first, and just get cheesy about it, right? Everybody always says, like, you have to be ready, you have to work on yourself before you can really be a part of something else. And I think that if you're the kind of person that your relationship is important to you, and I don't know if it's a learned thing. I mean, I come from a family that, my aunts and uncles were still, married, and my parents were married for many, many years, and my grandparents. So I don't know. I gave a lot of value to relationships. And so I knew it was going to be a big part of my life. So if you're somebody that gives a lot of value to relationships, I think it's important that you know what you're getting yourself into. And I think to give somebody some steps towards that, good old personality types. I mean, you have to, like, study them. You have to know, like, what you fit with, and you have to know.
We use the Clifton Strengths Finder, so like maybe have them test a little bit. Like,
I mean, look, it's funny because you have all these online dating, apps, and I guess I'm gonna, show my age group. I never been on one. I never downloaded one. I don't know much about them, but I'm gonna guess that that's basically what they do, is they try to at least guide you and match you. And I think that's a good start, but there's got to be I'm going to circle back to this. There's got to be something about when she walks out of that cab. You can't. Look, I think the part that could be missing sometimes with the online dating is whatever happened to just going somewhere and physically seeing someone and being attracted to them, and then figuring out if they're like, but there's got to be like this spark, right? So go out and find that spark, and then know that the reasoning behind that online dating app is that you've got to support each other. And I think that's how I'll kind of end that, is I'll say, look, like, Elise and I always are supporting each other. Yeah. And today, as the kids got older, we decided we want to go kind of circle back and have personal hobbies that had to do with sports and athletics. And I went on the journey of Ironman, and Elise, she wins bodybuilding and fitness competitions. Yeah. And feels amazing, looks amazing. And sometimes she's prepping for a show, and sometimes, I'm prepping for a race, and we have the kids and work and everything. It's like, you do so much, and people ask you, like, how do you get this done? Well, you're working as a group, right? And you all have this intention of being successful, and
team sport.
So
that's awesome. And it's good, like you said, kind of wrap this part up, but the kids get to watch what you're doing.
That's it.
And that's the key too. Like, it makes it all worth it. Like, I kind of look back to when I was a kid, and I love, my mom showed me a lot of other things, but it wasn't like we woke up every Saturday and ran, 30 miles to practice. I didn't even know that people did that. Like, that seemed nuts to me. And now I hope my kids see that, like, I'm getting up, I'm going running, my wife is doing the same. And I just think it's important. Sure. I know you mentioned a little bit about buying the first properties in college, but how did you kind of get you're working for Philip Morris, and maybe go into a little bit more detail of like first transactions and how you kind of built your business?
Well, let me just say before I forget it, because when you asked me, I kind of understood what you're getting at, is like, how do you really get through these things and kind of get where you are today? I think is kind of the direction of the question. And I think you really have to understand collaboration. And if I look back at my career, and every time I've been super successful, it's because I've found a piece that I collaborate with that kind of puts what you're doing on steroids. Like it just pours gasoline on it.
Yeah.
It's just, you do really well. And, Elise was the first person who that was with, and she really organized the backside of the office and really, had a clear understanding of operations and accounting and economics. And she really made that work while I went out and really strategically moved the business. And so that was piece one. And I think that when I was in Vegas and I was, investing, in real estate initially, I wasn't doing it in a voluminous way. I wasn't doing many transactions yet. I was kind of doing some because that's all I could really figure out how to do financially, et cetera. And I met a gentleman who was talking a big game and acting like he was doing a lot of deals. And I ended up selling him one of my deals, like as a wholesale deal.
Mm-hmm.
And he started doing this. It was a house that he was flipping. And I would see him coming by my projects like every day, like seeing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey man, like, how come you keep coming over to my stuff?
Yeah.
And he's like, the thing is, I don't really know how to find these deals. I don't really know how to fix these deals. I'm not really sure how to sell them. Like,
yeah,
I think I know how I can get the money. He's like, how many of these you think you could do?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, if you had like all the ability to buy these, then I think I could probably figure out how to do 20 or 25 of these a month.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, cool. He's like, do that. And I was like, all right. So in August of 2008, I think it was like 18 houses under contract, and we funded them all that month.
And so he just funded the deals.
Right.
That was a unique year to do that too.
Very unique. And I had done a calculation for him, which people might find this strange, but I had determined at what rate the market was losing value and at what rate I could buy it as a foreclosure below that value, and how fast it would take me to acquire it, fix it, put it back on the market as a finished product to those that still were purchasing, and be able to get that delta. And so I was doing that. And we ended up buying, I think it was like 65 houses between that August and that December 2008.
Wow.
And I was doing one or two houses the month before.
Yeah.
Like four.
So how do you ramp something like that up? Like, what did you, all third party contractors?
That was the part I loved, man.
Yeah.
Like that was what I was like good at.
Yeah.
Like, I understood construction. Like I was a good relationship builder. I knew how to get people motivated. I knew how to organize stuff, and I loved to work, man.
Yeah.
Like, I would grind, 3 a.m, 12 at night, like
Didn't
there's a
matter.
time in your life where you don't have a wife and kids.
Yep.
Right. And so you're just kind of focused on building yourself. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to build myself in that way. And so,
was there ever a moment just being in the beginning where you were like, man, I'm in over my head? Or didn't even care?
That part came.
Yeah.
And you definitely get there at moments, and you have to make adjustments for sure. But one of the adjustments I made is I realized that wasn't the greatest opportunity that existed. And I say this a lot today to people. I say, what is the greatest opportunity that exists in the economy?
Yeah.
Because you kind of got to stop yourself and you just start doing things and you don't realize, wait, time out. Like, what is the greatest opportunity right now with what's going on? And so in that moment, December 2008, and especially after having so much success in turning that many flips, in that time, you would think that I was just going to keep going that way.
Yeah.
But I understood the market at that time, and I understood that was going to go away and all of the value was going to hit that bottom by January 2009.
Yeah.
So there was no longer this play of, as it's coming down, I can still get value. Right. And so I said to my partner at the time, who I was collaborating with, I said, look, I think we got to go a different route. I think that in this particular neighborhood that a couple years ago, we would sell something for $250,000, $300,000. I see these prices coming down to $25,000 or $30,000. we need to try to get as many of them as we can. And so we went out, and he found a larger investor who was in the timber business out of Oregon, and raised $500,000 from them. And he told them about me, and he said, hey, like, this guy is going to be able to like put your money to work. And in 45 days, I'd bought 12 properties with that $500,000, and I'd gotten them fixed with tenants in it, rented for like $850, and they were making like a 12% return on their money in 45 days.
That's crazy.
So the next month they sent another $1 million, and then the next month their friends sent like a couple million.
Mm-hmm.
And we bought several houses in that way for that portfolio. And then I thought that that's where I should also start putting my own money.
Yep.
So then we bought 120 of those houses in 2009. I went on to buy 300 apartment doors in 2010 in Las Vegas. And that's when I had learned that on that side of the business, the investor money and raising and all this, I didn't have a handle on it as much.
Yep.
And it was just my partner who's really on that side, managing that piece.
Yep.
And that was the first challenge.
Yeah.
Because just as, I don't know what the word is, unorganized or
you're moving at such a high pace.
Just as much as he lacked the experience on the real estate side, he kind of lacked the experience on that side. And it came a point where it was like, wait, like, there's this much money that we need to return, and there's this many deals we're working on. And it's like, wait, like there's this gap. And it was like, I had to work hard to figure out how to fix that gap.
Yeah.
Right.
And you're saying gap in like
we were basically upside down, I thought.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I said, look, I'm not going to freak out. I'm going to figure out how to like work through this.
Yep.
But we're in a bind right now. And it was a lot for us at the time. I think it was something like $500,000 that it looked like, we weren't going to be able to repay in that moment.
Yeah.
Right.
Meet the equity requirement on the day.
Right. Yeah. And so but again, like you learn, that's what life is.
Yeah.
And you're okay sharing that because I want someone else watching this to know, hey, look, like, these things happen.
Yeah.
How old were you at the time?
I was 24 at the time.
That's awesome.
25.
And if you don't put yourself in that situation, you don't learn.
Yeah.
And you can't, nobody can tell you, like, even you saying that, nobody can, until they put themselves in the situation, they may remember what you said, but they got to feel.
Absolutely.
Like, you got to feel the pain. You got to know that
you can't give up on it either. It's like you could have in that moment be like, oh, well, you're just going to wash your hands of it and like you're just going to walk away from it. And it's like, that's not the answer. Like, the answer is longevity. And people don't look at real estate sometimes enough, especially when you're starting. You're just looking for this short, like, term money, the short-term gains. And it's like, no, like, you've got to have a longevity mentality. I mean, I can proudly say that, like, in the 22 years of doing this and different times that I've collaborated with people, investors, and this and that and the other, it's like I've never lost anybody's money. And and maybe the deal might have.
Yeah.
I have never lost anybody's money because I've always figured out, look, I owe this person, and I know that there's legal documents for that, and you don't have to guarantee anything, and sometimes the deal doesn't work, but that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that someone that goes a different path that's bad. It's just you got to know what works for you, because you were saying, if you can live your personal life, a certain way, and that's your happiness, that's how you do what you do. And you got to know what that means for yourself. So anyway, that was probably the first hurdle, but, after that hurdle, I realized that, that partner was not the best partner for what I eventually wanted to do.
Yep.
And so we kind of split ways, and we divided what we owned at the time. And it was really interesting. We, as an example, I had, I think it was like 40 or 50 apartments right here, and he had the other same 30 or 40 right next to it.
Yeah.
And 2 months later, his were in foreclosure and all empty and doors kicked in, and mine was like thriving, and I was exiting out of it and selling it for a profit.
Yeah.
And it's just, so when you make certain decisions, and by the way, that person is great, and they were a great piece of my life, and and I think that did what it did.
I also think that people get stuck on the fact, like, when you're coming up, you're trying to learn from so many different people, and you don't have access to resources the way you probably do today, obviously.
Right.
And so you're getting in there and you're learning. So like sometimes, like, I've had deals with people where it was a great success. I knew we weren't going to be going on after that point, because I'd kind of figured out what I needed to know. And so you just kind of, sometimes it's not, I don't even know if the word's outgrow. You just they're just not the right person, as you said.
Timing was great at the beginning of that relationship, and then 3-4 years later, it was no longer that, and that's okay, right? Because they went on, and today they're doing great things, right? And today we're doing great things, and so what I do take from it is I know that collaborations are key to your business.
We're Invested Podcast is produced by Atrium Management Company. Thanks for tuning in. And don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe.